Hey guys, welcome back to my sewing room. So in between making some of my other gowns, I was asked to create a gown for a styled shoot that would be in January. So I decided to go with this design because it was the fabrics and stuff that I already had on hand. So in this video, I'll be showing you guys how I created most of this gown. So let's go ahead and get started. So I started with draping this, and by luck would have it, of course, the model is very similar to my dress form measurements. So what I told them is I'm just going to go ahead and make a size 6 and then we'll fit it from there. So I'm starting with draping my center front panel, and with this dress I decided to go ahead and do an arm's eye princess seam. So that means that instead of the princess seam going up and down the bust line like towards the shoulder, it's going towards the armhole area. So I am just going to go ahead and drape this, and it's pretty self-explanatory. You just want to make sure that both panels are nice and smooth, and you can also do this by snipping into the bottom here up to the waistline to make sure that everything's nice and smooth. Now I've made this silhouette so many times that I already have skirt pattern pieces, the skirt front and back. So I just used the pattern pieces that I already had to create the skirt, and I just cut them out and placed them onto the dress form by pinning the princess seams. So now I'm doing my cutout. So I measured 4 inches from my center front, and then I went down 3 inches from my armhole area, and then I'm connecting those lines, and then I'm measuring down, I think it was, I can barely see, I think like 7 inches or something like that, down my side seam, and I'm connecting that line as well to the waistline. And then I'm just going to go ahead and draw in my side seam as well as some notches that will help us align all the pieces in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then now I am working on my neckline. So I measured up 3 inches from my apex point, and I put a point there. And now I'm drawing in my my neckline, and it takes quite a few times to draw the neckline because you want to make sure it's perfect. So don't be discouraged if you have to redraw your neckline multiple times. I do it all the time. And I didn't realize that I didn't record the rest, but here it is. So I'm showing you guys that there will be buttons down to the waistline here at the back, and then there'll be a zipper closure, and then there'll be about an inch or so worth of space between the zipper stop and the go day start. My biggest boo-boo that I didn't do here that I would need to do in my next pattern making process is cut out where the cutout is actually going to be, so I can take in the excess that was created when I actually did the cutout. So now I'm over at my sewing table, and I'm sewing down the center front seam of my bodice, and I'm doing that for my crepe layer, which is my outer layer, and my lining layer as well. And I should mention that I have all of my pieces cut out of crepe and lining, and for the lining I'm using a crepe back satin. So what I'm just doing here is just assembling the bodice. So the center front seam, the princess seams, and then in the back I'm doing the princess seams in the back. I'm not sewing the side seams yet. You guys know I like to make sure that I sew the front, and then I sew the whole back, and then I make sure everything fits, and then I sew the side seams. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Like I said, I'm doing that for my bodice, my main layer bodice, and my lining bodice as well. I actually had 2 days to make this dress before the fitting with the model, which was coincidentally rescheduled, but that's okay. So I just made sure I was, really trying to make sure that I had this dress finished. So that's why, because usually I don't assemble the lining until after I finish most of the dress, just to make sure there aren't any adjustments that need to be made to the base layer. And then I would obviously transfer those adjustments to the lining. But this time I just went ahead and sewed everything at the same time. Okay, so while I'm here on my machine, I'm also going to sew my straps. So I cut, it was about 1.5 inches by 14.5 inches or 13.25 or something like that. Inch strip. It's not on the bias, and then I just put them together and sewed them with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. And I'm sewing both straps the same way. And I'm going to put my bodice pieces to the side and start working on my skirt. So here I have my center front piece and my side front piece, and I'm sewing them down the princess seams all the way down to the bottom. And I'm doing both sides, and I'm also doing the same thing to the lining. So I'm going to sew the center front to the side front pieces of the lining as well.
My skin is cold, as is my heart. I'm falling apart with a smile. My bridges are burning.
After I sew the princess seams, now I'm going to do a stay stitch around my cutout. So what a stay stitch is it prevents the bias part of the neckline or whatever you're working on from stretching during the construction process. So you want to make sure that you're stay stitching, especially since this is really on the bias. So I did both sides, and I'm also doing the same thing for the lining. And now I'm here working on my lining bodice, and I'm stay stitching around the cutout of the lining bodice as well as the neckline and all around the armholes and everything here on the lining bodice. And I did not do this for the face bodice, just for the fear that my stay stitching would show through, because the crepe was actually pretty thin. And that is another thing I will correct the next time I make this for an order. But more on that later. I'm just going to go ahead and continue explaining what I'm doing now. So like I said, I'm just stay stitching around the whole thing. And you don't want to keep your needle down and pivot. You want to sew off the edge and then start at the next edge and start that way, so that you're creating a nice clean like 90-degree angle, rather than pivoting and kind of having to guesstimate where to turn. Okay, so now that I have everything stay stitched, I'm folding my lining in half, my lining skirt front in half, and I'm finding the middle point there, and then I'm matching that middle point to my center front seam of my bodice. And of course my princess seams don't line up, and that's because I used a different pattern for my skirt than I did for my draped bodice, but it's totally fine. It will all be covered with lace in the end. So what I'm doing is just pinning left and right, and I'm making sure to pin all of my seams open, because at this point I hadn't ironed anything yet. So everything is still how it is. Everything has not been pressed yet because I'm trying to move very quickly. Now I'm going to sew my waistline seam with a centimeter seam allowance, and like I said, everything that I'm doing for my lining, I'm doing for my outer layer as well. So I may not show you twice, but I'm doing it for both layers. Now I'm working on my illusion panel here in the front. My piece was 4.5 inches long by 2.5 inches wide, and I am sewing it on like how I do an invisible zipper. So I'm starting at my notch point that I made on my pattern, and I'm just pinning it all the way down. And when I get to the seam allowance there, I'm kind of flipping my bodice so I can access the right side of the seam allowance, and I'm placing a pin right there. And then I'm going to sew that with a centimeter seam allowance, and then I'm going to do the other side. So the same way you would sew an invisible zipper, and it actually is a lot easier when you have a center front seam there as well. So if you could squeeze a center front seam in your bodice when you're doing a bodice like this that can be covered later on with decorations or lace, I would highly recommend it. But here I am flipping the bodice over, and I'm catching the other side of the seam allowance, the right side of the bodice, and I'm just going to go ahead and pin and sew that down as well. So if you are efficient at sewing in a visible zipper, this will be a breeze to you. And then I'm just going to go ahead and check my work to make sure it looks good. And I have to tell you, every time I sew it, it gets better and better every time. Now I am assembling the back of my skirt. I'm sewing in between my 2 notches that I had there from my zipper stop to my godet start. And now I'm inserting my godet. So I'm going to place a pin right there at my center back seam where it stopped, and then I'm going to start sewing right where I stopped sewing with the godet start, and I'm going to sew the godet down the center back seam of the back of my skirt, and I'm going to sew on both sides. Now, before you sew your godet on, you could actually line it. So you could use a lining fabric and line the godet, turn it right sides out, give it a good press, understitch it, and then sew on your godet. But I decided not to line my godet. Reasons I cannot tell you why, because I should have lined it. But it is what it is, and I need to move forward. So like I said, I'm going to sew both sides of the godet, and then we're going to move on to the next step.
Everything falls into place. The minute you leave and give me space. I wanna know how it feels to live and let go.
Okay, so my next step is inserting my zipper. Now, since I always leave a 2 centimeter seam allowance here in my center back, I'm just going to go ahead and do a basting stitch here at my 2 centimeter seam allowance, so I can know where to insert my zipper. And then I'm going to insert my invisible zipper the regular way that you insert invisible zipper. If you guys need a detailed tutorial on that, leave me some hearts in the comments, and I will be sure to make one along with my tailor's hem or pressing hem tutorial as well. So when I sew in my invisible zippers, I always do 2 rows of stitching. So I'm doing my first row not so close to the zipper teeth. This is just making sure that my zipper is actually where it needs to be. And then I'm going to go ahead and do my second row of stitching super close to my zipper teeth, so that when you zip the zipper up on the bride, you cannot see that there's a visible zipper there. It just looks like it is a continuation of the center back seam.
Falling apart with a smile. My bridges are burning. I'm holding the match. I'm ready to fall. Will you catch? Dive right into the wild side.
Now I'm going to sew the princess seams of the back, and like I said, everything I'm doing here for my face layer, I'm also doing for my lining, so make sure that you're assembling all these at the same time. Okay, so now that I have everything all done, now I tried it onto the dress form just to make sure that it fits, and it does. So I'm going to take everything over to my ironing table and press everything really good. Now that I have everything pressed, I'm going to go ahead and sew on my straps. I'm just sewing them onto the front bodice first. So I'm placing them right sides together and sew them onto my front bodice with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. You could base this by hand, because I noticed when I did it by machine, it kind of moved over a little bit. Now that I have my straps on onto the front bodice, I'm going to connect the bottom of my cutout here at the side seam, and I'm going to sew down the side seam. Now, I didn't sew completely down the side seam because I was running out of white thread, so I wanted to make sure that I had enough thread to sew the top of the side seam as well. So that's why I kind of stopped here in the middle. And then I'm going to go up to the top of the side seam and sew that as well, so the top of the cutout area, and sew that with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Everything I sew is with a 1 centimeter seam allowance, guys. Now I am connecting the straps to the back of the bodice where the strap goes. And then I'm just going to finish off my side seam. Notice that I switched to a kind of beige color thread. Don't kill me, y'all. It's a sample dress. I didn't have any white thread, and I sure was not about to invest any more money in this project to go out and buy any thread right now. So I'm sewing down my side seams on both sides, and like I said, I'm doing the same things for my lining. Now that I have my lining assembled, now I'm sewing in my cups. So what I did was I pinned it to the top of the princess seam, and now I am smoothing it out, and then I'm going to pin it to the bottom there at the princess seam, and then I'm going to loosely tack it in. Now I say loosely tack because I like to reuse a lot of my things. So my cups I reuse, my zippers I reuse. So after I make my samples and after they've served their purpose, I like to recycle some elements within them. You can call it cheap, whatever you want to. My YouTube channel don't make that much money, y'all, so I recycle. Okay, and now I am attaching some bones to the princess seam allowance of my lining bodice so that you can't see it, because I don't like to look at my dress and see boning channels. So note to self, next time attach the boning before you sew on the cups, because it makes it harder after the cups are already sewed on. So I'll let you guys know so you'll make that same mistake. Now I am combining the lining and the face. So I put the face inside of the lining and everything's right sides together. And then I'm just going to pin all around the neckline and sew that together with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Now, I have a lot of biases here at my neckline in the top edge of my dress. So I got some 1/2 inch soft wriggly boning, or you could even call it horsehair braid. It's 1/2 inch, and that's what I'm going to use to go ahead and reinforce my neckline, which I will show you guys in just a sec. And I also forgot to mention that I'm not sure where the footage is, but I did sew some button loops to the top part of my bodice before it goes to the waistline. I did sew button loops there. I'm not sure where the footage is. Guys, I'm starting to film differently now, so I keep forgetting to press record. So please bear with me. I'm not a videographer. I'm a dressmaker. So I'm starting to work on it. But anyway, I am going to start by sewing the lining to the zipper tape. So I'm going to start by sewing the lining to the zipper tape, and then I'm going to go all the way up the zipper and then come around and do the rest of the neckline. Okay, so yes, here I am sewing the lining to the zipper tape, and I'm using a zipper foot so I can get really nice and up and close to that zipper tape, so that when you kind of open the dress, you don't really see zipper tape, you just see lining, and I love that look. So after I finish that, now I'm switching back to my regular foot, and I have my 1/2 inch horsehair here, and I'm just sewing that along the upper edge of the neckline. Now I did it wrong here and I had to unpick it and do it again. You want to make sure that your you want to make sure that your horsehair is more towards the seam allowance than the actual bodice. So I had to unpick it and redo it. But I put the half-inch horsehair around the whole neckline, and that really helped stabilize it in a way that was still nice and flexible and not super hard.
My skin is cold, as is my heart.
Okay, so this is the point that we're going to stop at this video. It still needs one hell of a press and steaming and everything, but this is where we're going to stop. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Stay tuned for part 2, and I'll see you guys in my next one.